Hello and welcome to the Peak and Roll podcast. Today we have a really fun episode talking about FIBA U19, the World Cup, and the kind of end of that. And we're going to be talking about Spain, how they beat France. We have a Jonathan Givony article that outlines kind of the winners and losers of the FIBA U19 World Cup. And lastly, we're going to do a brief summer league breakdown of mine and Caleb's very favorite prospect, Anthony Black. I don't know if yours is Anthony Black. Mine is. But we're also talking about Ausar Thompson, which is our guy on our favorite team, the Detroit Pistons. And you might say, well, those guys didn't have the most outstanding performances. Like we could break down a Keegan Murray. We could talk about a Shaden Sharp. We could talk about a Victor Wembanyama. But these are guys who do things that kind of went under the radar, in my opinion. And there's a lot to talk about, even if they didn't put a ton of numbers on the stat sheet. But Caleb, I know you just went on a little vacation. How did that go?
It was good. Today's my last day, so I have a little bit of just some thoughts about going back to the real world tomorrow. But yeah, other than that, it is what it is. Vacations have to end eventually, and it's been nice because I've been starting to get back to some summer league basketball. Haven't really had too much time to watch that, but I've just been keeping up the statistics for everything. But yeah, just getting right back into it again.
Yeah, summer league has been an important part of my weekend. I mean, you have the 4th of July, but also summer league. It's just something to look forward to, especially with the Pistons playing. But I loved watching Jarris Walker last
Oh
night
yeah.
in his summer league debut. Overall, just all of it's been fun. Victor Wembanyama, he was not that great offensively in his first outing, but defensively, he was able to really produce. Just with that frame, you're always going to be able to be good. And sorry if you hear some background noise. The family's all up. But getting into the FIBA U19, Spain won. They took down France, and they last won in 1999. And that brings us right into the Givony article. We're talking about the kind of winners and losers. And by losers, I talked about this the past couple times. We've talked about quote, quote, losers. These are just guys who underwhelmed and probably didn't play to their standards. And probably we're going to talk about ways that they could have been better and ways that they can be better to kind of make it to that next level. The first one is Zan Almansa, who was one of my favorite guys to watch during this FIBA U19 because he kind of had some of those unicorn traits. He was the MVP. He was the first in overall player efficiency rating, and he was only 17 years old, which I think sticks out to me as he's dominating against these other guys who are 18 or 19 years old. So what do you think?
I mean, I know I've covered Zana Mansa before in previous podcasts, but he just was outstanding all tournament. I mean, you can't have, and I know if you read Cavani's article there, the first person that should be on the winner is Zana Mansa because he is the ultimate winner from all this. Spain pretty much steamrolled right through their way all throughout the whole tournament. They did have that close game with France in the finals, but Azano Mansa was just the heart and soul of that team. Just an absolute star the whole time, averaged around 16 points, 7 rebounds a game, just showing that he's going to be at least a lottery pick this year.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is he showed everything as a versatile player without the three-point shot, but shooting 90% at the free throw stripe, where before this he was a career 50%. So that's a clear upgrade for him. And usually when guys can hit from that free throw mark, it can translate to taking a few steps out to that three-point line. So I think if anything, it's just a growing point for him.
Yeah, he's already got a great interior game. We saw multiple examples of it. Just an absolute offensive rebounding machine just for his size, even with his athleticism. He's really great, too, on the defensive end, can guard at all levels, both on the perimeter and inside. But as you said, that three-point shot is going to be the ultimate decision maker for where his ceiling is going to be. Because as of right now, he'll be a really solid player with everything that he brings already. But once you start extending your offensive game, that's when it's really going to put it all together.
Yeah, and moving on, we have Alexander Sarr. I think he was a fantastic player throughout this whole U19. The big thing for me is he's kind of like a 7-1 unicorn. I know his brother is also in the NBA or was Oliver Sarr. I can't remember where he played last. Probably should have looked that up before. But just a defensive menace, great down low end on the perimeter.
Yeah, the key for Sarr though is he's got to start putting the offensive game together. But you saw throughout the whole tournament that he was confident in at least attempting some 3-pointers, and he's got a decent looking shooting mechanic already. So it looks like that he's starting to get there. But as you mentioned, just the defensive menace side of everything. I mean, he had that huge block against USA that pretty much sealed the game late in that game. I've seen him make some crazy steals. The dude, I mean, as fluid as he moves for a 7'1" big man at his age already is just absolutely awesome. But there is some concerns too. He does have like a lack of physical strength, but I'm sure once he gets into the professional like NBA weight training, whatever programs they have for that, he'll bulk him up and he'll definitely make a presence in the league.
Yeah, I agree with you that 100%. He has a future in the NBA. What do you think is his future?
I could see him being a rim protector stretch guy because, as I mentioned before, the offense still has to come together. He's already a good finisher down low and has some good touch within the paint. But just like Azano Mansa, the key is stretching your offensive game, becoming more developed with it. I wouldn't say he really has the advanced interior skills that Almanza has, but I do looks like at times already that he's. I mean, obviously 7'1", a lot bigger than Almanza, a little bit more to his wingspan, but the defensive presence is already there. He's shown that he can guard on all levels at an elite level already. But once he puts that offense together, then that's where he's really going to be valued as an NBA player. And I could still see him still being taken in the top 20 just based off potential alone. He's also a very young guy. He'll get a chance this upcoming year to play in the NBL, just like LaMelo Ball and RJ
Yep.
Hampton did. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits in with that development in their system there instead of going back to the overtime elite.
Yeah, the Overtime Elite is a pretty interesting organization. We saw Amen and Ausar Thompson. And wasn't Izan Almansa also in Overtime Elite?
He was, yeah, but now he's going to be in the G League next year.
Yeah, I don't know if that's concerning that you see these guys kind of leaving that route after two guys just went number 4 and 5 in the NBA draft. Maybe they don't think it's the best fit for them, but it's just to me, it just might signal something.
Well, if you look too, the only players to be drafted from OTE, like straight out of it, are the Thompson twins. There's been
Hmm.
nothing else. Even guys projected in the late first, second round, they just don't make it straight out of there. The guys who do end up playing an extra year, whether it's in college basketball. I mean, you look at some of the top OTE guys right now. Rob Dillingham, he's going to be playing for Kentucky next year. Kanan Carlisle, point guard, he's going to be playing for Stanford. Both of those guys are 4-star recruits. Rob Dillingham, more of a 5-star end guy. But that's just what most players opt to do. They'll do the OTE program throughout high school, get a little bit of recognition. It's really mostly just for recognition throughout media. But in the end, most of those high end players end up playing in a next level league, or they keep going on to college basketball. Because I know one of the Thompson twins, Knox, was playing against kids younger than them, and
Yeah.
they were right about that. I mean, most of those guys, they're all in high school. But I can just see where minus the Thompson twins, the route seems to be get some recognition, get your name built up through OTE, then take your skills to the next level. At least for right now, it is.
Yeah, and because it's so new, anything can change, and I
Yeah.
think things will change. But like, look at Dominic Barlow. He was also in OTE. I think he was the first guy to play in OTE that got into the NBA. With the Spurs right now, he's having a pretty good summer league himself. I think he might still be on a two-way spot for the Spurs.
I think he is too. He was an undrafted guy. I thought he might have snuck into the first round last year. And there was another guard too. I might have them mixed up because I know they both began with J's. I know there's Jason Gortman and John Montero. I think it was John Montero because I think Gortman was this year's draft. I'm not too sure about that off the top of my head, but
Yeah, OTE is definitely an interesting route, but this isn't an OTE episode. We're talking a lot about the FIBA U19. Moving on to Baba Miller. Caleb, I'm just going to let you take this one away. I know you have a lot to say about him.
I'm a huge Baba Miller fan. I really was impressed with some of the things he did. Some of his numbers are not necessarily eye-popping from a scoring standpoint, but just his presence himself. I mean, they have him listed as a 7-foot, like small forward, power forward. So just to show like how crazy it is already. I mean, you could see him guarding all three levels on perimeter and also guarding down low by the forwards. But he's just an all-around versatile player. One of the things I know people have been knocking him for is his aggression that he brings to the game. But I thought during Spain, he definitely showed that he can bring it when it really matters. He does have two. He's getting more confidence in his offense as well. He's starting to incorporate more of his shooting. But I know I mentioned before too, he had that weird season last year at Florida State where he was suspended for like 16 games for some. You can make whatever you want of it. I just think it's bogus NCAA ruling. But just to see him in a full year this year with a team like Florida State, especially when you look at a team like that, they've been pretty underwhelming the past few years from what they're supposed to be. But hopefully he can bring them back. But I'm a huge Baba Miller guy, and I've seen too now where he's been projected on Giveno's mock board as high as 22, which I think that's fair. I think there's still some questions that you have to see him play through college basketball next year. But just from what you have from international clips alone, I mean, the guy looks like an NBA ready player just from size and fluidity movement alone.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to pull something up as we speak. And that's just going to bring us to the next one. Melvin Ajinça, breakout player in this U19. When you look at the U18 he participated in last year, or whenever, last year I believe it was, he was the 6th best scorer on France. So he wasn't touching the stratosphere with his scoring marks, but he broke out to become the 2nd highest scorer in all of U19, which is a pretty big thing, playing on a high-level team such as France with all those different guys that we talked about last episode that you probably have heard of if you're really interested in into the U19 circuit. He's an NBA body already, 6'8", with a really solid frame, 49% from 3 on 6.4 attempts per game. And that screams NBA ready to me. If you can shoot the ball like that and you're already built well, you have a place in the NBA. It just depends on where you're going to go.
And you never really realize, too, that he's 6'8", because he certainly doesn't look like it out there. But, I mean, the dude's just a total explosive athlete. We can see him finish at the rim as well, aside from just the three-point shooting alone. And there's really not much to say about this guy you can't really like about him. I've seen some concerns for he's not a great creator for others, but when you have someone that can shoot 49% and play great defense, I mean, he was pretty much guarding the best player on the other team's team the whole tournament. So if you're a 3-and-D guy, I don't see why you need to worry about creating for others. I'm sure that Brooklyn isn't asking Mikal Bridges to get 10 assists a game, or Atlanta's not asking DeAndre Hunter and Sadiq Bey to get like 10 assists per game.
Michael Porter Jr.?
Exactly.
Yeah, Denver isn't looking for that.
Exactly. At that point, when you have that kind of frame and that kind of shooting ability, you know your role. Your job is to defend and also makes open shots when you get the ball in your hands. And that's something Ajinça does very well.
Yeah, and I was looking at the article, the Givony article, and the previous ranking he had him for the 24 NBA draft was no ranking. So he wasn't even on his mind, not even an honorable mention. He's all the way up at 26 now. So he's snuck into his, as of now, first round grading. And that's a huge leap. I don't think anybody else had a leap that big. I'm going through it as we speak right now. Like we see Izan Almansa went from 18 to 8, which is huge. You see Alex Sarr 19 to 13, Baba Miller from 38 to 22. And the guy we're on right now, as we keep going, we might see one, but the next one isn't even that big. Caleb? Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say with the Ajinça too. I mean, the thing with that's what's nice about FIBA is once it passes, then you really start to see when the European, like younger international talent is going to be, or what year they're projected to be drafted. Because there's really no great resource out there. Like early on, like if you want to look when we were looking at late June, there's really no good way to gauge like who's draft eligible for everything. But I just think Ajinça, like it's nice too to see Ajinça. I mean, he's pretty much on everybody's big board now. He definitely turned a lot of heads.
Yeah, I think for me, watching those highlights, I didn't watch the finals game live, but seeing the World Cup game, the highlights, he was kind of the most dynamic guy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, Caleb, can you say this guy's name? It's Burke. Let me try it first.
Yeah.
Bayuk Tunsel.
I actually think that's correct. I think it's Bayuk Tunsel, yeah.
From Bayuk Tunsel. Cool. Yeah, and we have on here that he's potentially heading to UCLA, which might be a really good fit for him. So is there any holdup with that?
You know, I'm not really sure what that is because for a while there's been this rumor of UCLA getting a highly touted international big man, and the guy they were supposed to get. Oh, are you good?
You're good. Keep going. My light dropped.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna fix that and mute. You keep going.
All right, but yeah, so the situation with Brian Tunsell with UCLA. So for a while, they've been saying there's a possible elite international big man heading there, and a lot of people expected it to be Ade Mara, who was a projected first rounder to some for this year's upcoming draft. But recently, it just broke out that Burke Boynton-Sell is going to be that big man, possibly joining UCLA, which I would be super excited for. I would love to see him next to Adem Bona, who's a sophomore coming back from last year, former five-star recruit. He was projected first rounder last year. He chose to come back for a sophomore season at UCLA, but now he's looking at being a possible top 25 pick. You put that with Bayek Tunsell. I mean, that's potentially like one of the most elite front courts in the nation next year. I mean, he's already got such a smart basketball player, high IQ, pretty good defender already from the help side. He can also show too he can shoot the ball a bit, but just a few of his knocks that I just from me watching him personally is he does need to improve himself physically. I noticed a few times one-on-one he didn't really fare too well against some other bigs. And also as well, he needs to tighten up his decision making a little bit. I know last time we talked about the time, and I don't have the stats pulled up right now, but he was passing the ball at 4.2 assists a game while at the same time turning the ball over 3.4 times a game. So if he cleans up that assist to turnover ratio a little bit, I think he can be a good quality early second rounder, or who knows, maybe a first rounder in 2025.
Yeah, these are the guys where you look at them and say, do you really want to declare for the 24 draft? There's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be those guys. I mean, he's almost 19 years old. It's not like he's 22, 23. He still has time. And at this point, it's all about getting that guaranteed money. And there's all these rules in the new CBA that kind of make you more valuable if you're an early second round guy. But I think the goal is to become a first rounder because you're guaranteed 2-2 if
And
you play well enough.
I think UCLA is a perfect situation too for him to show off because I've seen, some early college analysts, they're putting UCLA in their top 30, 25, whatever. I saw who they lost in their roster and who's all coming back or what they're bringing in. And just my first glance, they are not a top 30 team. This is a roster that needs all the help they can get next year. I trust Mick Cronin being a good coach, but if Boyuk Tunsell ends up going to UCLA, it'll definitely possibly put them into the top 30, and they'll definitely be a tournament team next year.
On to a guy who I think I keep saying these guys are all my favorite, but I think somebody that really made me just go, what the heck, is Zachary Perrin of France. I don't think he was projected to be the leader of this team, especially when you have a Zachary Rissacher, because I think that's the guy you see in the top 5 of mock drafts. That's the guy you see as some people calling him a top, like a number 1 pick. But Zachary Perrin went in there, was second in player efficiency rating. He does struggle to guard in space, which limits kind of a lot of his ability there. But his post presence is absolutely there. He's a dominant roller. And for me, what I noticed the most, he's a sneaky athlete, being able to grab rebounds and push the pace, kind of run coast to coast and making those decisions. And for me, he screams fundamentals over athleticism. And that's something that we preached about a few episodes ago. Because this is a guy who has all the tools to make it in the NBA.
And he is working too. So one of his things is physical conditioning. You mentioned the sneaky athleticism. I know he's trying to get himself into better shape, which that's what they sound like they're working on, which I'm not really too worried about that right now. I mean, there's time for him to build out, but just from what he's doing in his current conditioning already, I mean, you mentioned everything. He's so sneaky athletic. He can run fast breaks and initiate offense off of him as well. Find open guys running down the floor. He's insane he's such a great interior force already too. Offensive rebounding machine. I have actually the box score pulled up right now from France versus Spain. He had 20 rebounds in that game, 5 offensive, 15 defensive. He's an excellent rebounder for his size. He's just, I really wish, I know I mentioned it before, I really wish he would have stayed at Illinois, or maybe not so much Illinois, because sometimes guys don't really pan out in their draft stock from there. But maybe at least in some kind of other college team that can find his skills, useful. And there's plenty of them. I just can't really think of a good one off the top of my head of current roster makeup. But that's someone who I would love to see play as a sophomore in college next year. I feel like he'd be one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, he has that potential. And on the Givoni mock, He was previously not ranked, and his new ranking is 44. I think with that showing, it's a little low, but you can't put all your stock in one tournament, one set
Right.
of games. I think you have to look at the course of the whole year. But I feel like at this point, that's kind of all we've seen is the FIBA U19. For some of these other high schoolers going into college, we haven't seen anything about them yet.
Hmm.
So I almost feel like he could have been a little bit more generous there. And we see his French teammate who had the bigger jump from no rank to, I think it was 38, 36, Bajinsa 26. So we went all
Yeah,
the way
no
from
rank
not
to
ranked to the first
26.
round. So interesting to me on that regard. Moving on, Caleb, Jordi Rodriguez. And he was the second leading scorer for Spain. Shot 39% from three. Talk about him.
Yeah, so Jordi Rodriguez is a guy you don't really know too much of. Obviously, there's Baba Miller and Azano Mansa. All the eyes are circling around those guys. But for what Rodriguez did for the team, he was, as you mentioned, second on the team in scoring, 39% from three-pointer, very good catch and shoot, knockdown shooter. But he seems to be, to me, he reminds me a little bit of what Denver has this year in Hunter Tyson. If you see him in the summer league, he's been playing really well and just doing what they ask him to do, just score for him and be the shooter. Because I know for Jordi Rodriguez, he has not the ideal frame, and I know he defensively he struggles a little bit physically, and also too he needs to improve a little bit on the inside as well. But if he can improve his frame and become more of a 3-and-D guy, build himself out physically, because he's a fairly young guy too. He's only around 19, 18 years old. But I mean, as far as a shooting mechanic, he's got it. He's got the 3-point shot already that can translate to the next level.
And once he, like, I think you said it big time, is once he gets his frame built up, his defense will come a little bit easier. And it feels like in today's NBA, you have to be 3-and-D if you can shoot the three. You
Yeah.
can't just be a 3-point shooter. I feel like mid 2010s, early 2010s is when we saw a lot of just 3-point shooters getting contracts. Big one for me was Tyler Johnson getting the offer sheet from the Nets, ending up with the Heat. You just saw a lot of that. And you saw a lot of those guys get big money, and then you saw them not be worth that money. Kyle Singler, anyone?
Oh man. Duncan Robinson, anyone?
Exactly. And that's a recent development, is we saw a lot of it early to mid 2010s, but we're still feeling the effects from some of these guys that have those big paydays. So if he's hoping to even hear his name called in the draft, you have to build that frame. You have to get better defensively. But this isn't that's not like the major critique. He was fantastic during this tournament. That's why we're talking about him right now.
Yeah, and he's a name that people should keep talking about him. Like I said, he's got the teammates that overshadow him, but this is still a really solid young player. I mean, he definitely has NBA future in him.
Yeah, whether that be 24, 25 is unknown, but he might be another candidate to kind of take that extra year. And with the new CBA, the older prospects are going to be more valuable to these teams that are over the cap and get to that second apron, because you're not going to be able to sign anybody in free agency. You're going to have to live off of getting these young guys. The Nuggets are a prime example of that.
Oh, I was just gonna say at the CBA, look at the Warriors. They just signed Trace Jackson Davis, seeing that they took 57th overall to a 4-year, $7 million deal or something like that. I mean, you don't even hear second round picks, especially 57th overall, getting that kind of, I read too, there were some things where they were calling in saying that he wasn't going to take a two-way deal with anyone, that they wanted to draft him. But the Warriors gave him that guaranteed money, and that's just what you're going to have to do in the future with those second round picks.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with him. And looking at the Givoni mock, he went from not ranked to number 55. So I don't know who was pushed out or who was pushed down from the 56, 57, 58, 59. I'd love to look at that and see who got cut from the list. But we're going to move on, Caleb, to kind of the underwhelming guys and what they could have done better, because these are guys who had big aspirations. And the first one is someone who I think we can both agree had, I think, the most disappointing FIBA U19 run, and that's Zachary Rissochet. Struggled mightily. I looked at the box score many times when I wasn't tuning in live, saw Zachary and said, oh, he's doing fine. But it was Zachary Perrin.
Yeah.
He's a guy who, it just seems like he can't create his own offense as effectively as I think a lot of people want him to. If you look at him in draft circles, they have him as a top 10 pick in the 24 draft. And I think he can still maintain that. Like I said, this was all just one little tournament. He has a lot more basketball to play until that 24 draft. And it was just disappointing to see him not be able to put things together after being such a highly touted guy. Yeah. 4 fouls, 0 points, and 5 turnovers in a championship game, Caleb. That's hard to do. Imagine somebody like Victor Wembanyama doing that when he was in France.
Oh, he would be flamed for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't live in France, so I don't know if he is getting flamed for this, but I don't know. That's a tough one.
Yeah, you mentioned fouling out. I know too, fouling was a big problem for Ricochet. There was that one game, it was in the quarterfinal where he played 2 minutes in the first half, had one turnover, 2 fouls, had to sit. He fouled out in a 50-point I've never heard of that in my entire life. When you're up 50 and you foul out, it just seems like, and he's a hyperactive defender. He was averaging 2 steals per game. And you can see too on the perimeter, he's lengthy, he's disruptive. That's where some of the defensive upside comes.
Mm-hmm.
But a great example about controlling your fouling situation is Chris Murray, who's a rookie this year. So I always wondered the year before when Keegan had that awesome year, because they went, year one, year after. I was like, why didn't Chris Murray ever play? He's like basically puts up Keegan numbers when he plays Keegan minutes. And his coach came on a podcast and said he just got into too much foul trouble. So I couldn't really show him off. Then you look at last year, he improves his defense and reduces his amount of fouling, and he puts up, like I've said, Keegan Murray numbers basically. So I think there has to be a level of control on defense with Ricochet, a little bit more of his timing and how much contact he wants to initiate as well. And then once he figures that out, I mean, like I said, he's got the steals number up there already, but also too, switching the offense, he still shot 44% from three, which is
Yeah.
really good. I know shooting was one of his major upsides. Just as you mentioned too, he probably for a top 10 pick, unless you're like an elite 3-and-D player, you have to be able to create your own shot to an extent. I know guys like DeAndre Hunter and Mikal Bridges, we mentioned earlier, they've eventually developed that part of their game. But another thing I saw too was he was apparently a very good passer, which I have seen him throw some good dimes, but in the tournament, he averaged 1.6 assists to 2.4 turnovers. So that's something too that he's going to have to clean up in the future. But I mean, I can still see why he's still considered a lottery pick by most. He definitely looks like he has some lottery potential, but as you mentioned, it's one tournament. It's a span of 7 games. But still, you would definitely want to see a little bit more from a lottery projected player.
I agree with everything you said there. I think, especially in today's NBA, where you have, I don't want to call them, you see a lot of fouls called like phantom fouls, or you see a lot of fouls called that aren't necessarily fouls, or they're not super aggressive. Things that you wouldn't see 20 years ago called.
No.
When you have a guy that is called a 3-and-D guy who's just getting in foul trouble, yeah, he might have a couple stops, but he's going to be on the bench before you know it. And you need guys who can be effective in that regard. And with this new NBA, you need to figure that out. And honestly, for him, one takeaway is just going and figuring out, watching all that tape, how to approach it differently, but keep that dynamic defense. Because, like you said, if he can do that, I mean, he's an easy lock top 10. He has all the tools, but I think he just needs to show a little bit more throughout the year. And if anything, this could be a little wake up call to him. I think he's going to be in the draft no matter what. But I mean, we said this on the first episode. I looked at the Gavoni mock way too early, the same time he posted this one like 4 years ago, 3 or 2. Can't remember when it was. BJ Boston, projected top 3 pick, went in the second round. So we might be a year from now, and Ricochet might be a second rounder. But I don't think anybody's hoping for that.
No.
Next up, Caleb, we have a slew of USA guys, and understandably so. USA, wasn't this their first time they didn't place since 2011?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, they had an issue with recruiting. I know a lot of guys declined. I know a lot of guys said, nah. So they went the high school route. They got a lot of guys who are still going to be seniors in high school. So who do you want to talk about first? There's a list of these guys.
Well, first of all, I wanted to mention about when you said that earlier, I'm like, I was just looking through guys, just write down like the prospect board. I'm like, man, so like Mark Mitchell or Kyle Filipowski didn't want to come and play, or Judah Mintz or Riley Kugel or Dylan Mitchell or Terrence Arsenault or Kello Ware was in the final round of 18. I think he didn't make the roster, as well as Ernest Uday. I mean, those guys were all top 40 recruits in 22,
Hmm.
are all going to have big sophomore years. But it's just like, man, like I just really wish some of these guys could have just came out and played for us because we just really struggled with youth and inexperience, it seemed like the whole time.
Yeah.
But I guess I'll start with Cody Williams because it's really interesting with him. So Ted Boyle being the Colorado head coach, it you would think Cody Williams would at least have some kind of maybe a little bit of advantage already, like getting some play time. In which Cody Williams, to me, you can see like the length is absolutely there. Just you see him on the
Hmm.
perimeter. I remember he was trying to someone I think it was against China maybe where the shot clock yeah, it was that game where the shot clock was expiring and he's just there with his arms up, just stretched out the whole time. The guy had no chance to go around him or anything. And he's already a disruptive defender, I mean, from length alone. He showed some shooting the one game too. And I think that was also the China game as well, where he went like 6 or 7 from the field. But mostly from what I see with him is he's not really an ideal slasher player, especially he had some good finishes through contact, but it seems like he fades away from the basket rather than going
Hmm.
through to the rim. And also too, he lacks some passing ability. The one pass I just always see him throw was the slash and cross court to the other side of the corner kick. That was pretty much the only time I ever saw him pass the ball like that when he was initiating with the ball. So there is some parts there, but something that was interesting on Cavani's mock board, or what he said in the article, was he didn't look ready to play as his role as a player on this roster. And I feel like that's typically when you have these high school guys coming in,
Hmm.
they're some of the best players in the country. They're some of the top players in their school. Cody Williams being a perfect example, top 10 recruit. And then you're asked to basically take this, not really a backseat role, but you're not asked to put up 25 a game like you might have in high school or whatever. It's a
Hmm.
totally different game that you're asked to play. And I think that quote that Gavoni had pretty much sums it up is he just didn't look ready to play his role.
Yeah, and that's tough. He's gonna get the opportunity when he goes to Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
100%. But the thing you look at is, and I know this might be speculating, is when you look at Team USA, the older guys that are in the NBA, a lot of those guys went through the circuit before, and it's kind of a brotherhood. I think I've heard that word thrown around
Yeah.
before. Um, Guys who can't really adjust to their role, I don't think get an invite. If there's
Mm-hmm.
guys that won't be able to figure it out, they won't be able to do it. I mean, you look at Carmelo Anthony, one of the most dynamic scorers of all time. You look at Kobe Bryant, kind of the same thing. Two guys who were very much shooters and did not look to pass unless they absolutely had to. And don't get me wrong, they've both had passes when they've needed to, and it's like insane. But they were able to adjust to their roles. And every player who succeeds on Team USA is generally able to because they know they can. Cody Williams, he might get another opportunity, kind of like in the other World Cup going on, I think in a couple months, where you have like Paulo Banchero and all of these guys headlining at Mikal Bridges.
I would say that's going to be all professional guys, though. That's not going to be
Yeah.
the young. Yeah.
But when he gets to that in a few
Yeah.
years,
When he gets that. Okay. I
when
see
he
what you
gets
mean
there,
now. Yeah.
I'm curious. Yeah, sorry, that was a long way around to say maybe this could hurt him in the long run. I don't know, especially with that quote there, because he's not just saying that; he really thinks that. And if he thinks that, maybe some higher ups in Team USA think that as well. But
Mm-hmm.
like I said, that is high tier speculation. Caleb, I we're gonna go on to Omaha Billy. There's a
Well,
lot to say about this guy because I know you had really high expectations for him coming in and they weren't met. So
yeah.
I want you to talk about him. I know the big things that I want to say though is that he was kind of like a wrecking ball out there, just kind of
Yeah.
being trying to be a force, trying to be an enforcer out there, but it really didn't pay off because I mean, you can be the strongest guy in the court, but you have to have some sense of feel, or else you're not going to be able to blend in with the offense. You're not going to be able to blend in with the defense. So that's all I
Yeah.
want to say about him.
I'm not going to say much either. We've said enough, but you pretty much said what I was going to say. High energy player. It's definitely there. He wants to make a difference in the game, but as you mentioned, it's feel. it looks like that he has a lack of feel for the game. I know he's only just started playing like organized basketball for only a couple of years now, but you can just see you have this high motor athlete, and sometimes it looks like he just gets ahead of himself and just doesn't really take time to really see through things or anything. But also too, I know as a big man for right now, he's a little undersized. He's like 6'8", 210 or something like that. But he does have at least a good outside game already. He demonstrated that he's got a good 3-point stroke. But as far as like you meant, you want that high motor big man to be down low, and that's where he has to put a little bit more bulk on, I would say, to really get it down there and just, like I mentioned before, find that level of balance and then just control of your athleticism. I mean, your energy.
Yeah, let's not beat the dead horse. Moving on.
No.
Moving on. Who else do we have here?
Kylan Boswell, I think, is the
Hmm.
last guy,
Yeah.
which I can cover him. So I'm a big
Yeah, go
Kylan
ahead.
Boswell guy. I'm really excited to see him play at Arizona this year. And I know I mentioned too, just the way he was utilized was just not really doesn't speak to his game, but I know he was not most efficient on offense. He also had a negative assist to turnover ratio.
Hmm.
But I'm still a big Kylan Boswell guy. I'm not selling my stock on him. I think the problem I had was Gavoni had him at 14th over on his big board, which I think that was a little too high in my opinion. Maybe more like late first, early second would be a little bit more appropriate. But
Mhm.
I think too he was probably thinking like I am, like big picture for Arizona next year. He's gonna get the keys to that team to run it. So hopefully he'll turn it around there. That's just all I
Yeah,
gotta say about him.
yeah, and looking at Omaha, he was ranked 26, dropped to 45. Um,
I
and
think
now we just kind of have. What were you gonna say? Sorry.
what was Boswell's like? I know he was like 14th, but he dropped to like 35th or something like that.
Boswell went from 14th to 36, so he
Oh
had a
yeah,
pretty major drop as
I
well.
was pretty close then.
Yeah, and it's interesting seeing the ups and downs because who knows, he might even by the end of this be number 10. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like they're going to be ever changing until we get to the draft, as it always is. But now we just have a grouping of these high school players that it's so hard to kind of judge them because they're high school players. Um, I think Trey Johnson and Dylan Harper could be on um, the winners quote quote list. I think they were really good, but I think you said it best when we were talking before this is that at critical times there was a major lack of experience because they just didn't get. I don't know. They're not built for the moment yet. They still need more
Right.
time to develop in that way. Not saying they're bad players, but it's just something where they're relying on these young guys when they should have been trying to get more of these college freshmen.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because they kind of contradict each other. So Dylan Harper, I thought was great defensively, especially in France, where he was coming up with the steals. Trey Johnson was a great offensive player the whole time, could make plays for others and distribute. It just seemed like defensively, he just never was really there or just noticeable. And then the same with Dylan Harper too on offense. I know he was he's pretty much like his brother Ron Harper, just a knockdown shooter. Didn't really hit too many of his threes or anything. But I mean, it's just, going back to it's only a 7-game span. It could be just a cold slump. But then there's just the two other guys too, Ian Jackson and Asa Newell. I don't know too much that Asa Newell is really on any big boards or how he plays, but I know Ian Jackson is. And
Mhm.
aside from just scoring, he's just one of those guys where it's just didn't really seem to bring any experience otherwise to the court. So maybe he'll take something from that and apply it in his senior year in high school next year. But if you're a North Carolina fan like myself, don't get too worked up over what you've seen or what you hear from FIBA U19. I mean, he's a young guy playing against some of the older, best talent in the world. So there's still time.
Yeah, he's a top 5 player in his class. So nothing to get too hyped up about. And I know if you're a fan of North Carolina, the one thing you're worried about is if these guys decommit, end up going OT or G League Ignite or go overseas.
Well,
There's always those opportunities.
given North Carolina's recent commitment and transfer portal stuff, I would be a little worried about Ian Jackson too.
Okay, Caleb, we're going to take our first break. Okay, and welcome back. We are talking about the Pistons versus Magic Summer League game that happened last night. I forgot we were working off a back-to-back. We're not going to talk too much about the game tonight. I don't feel too confident about giving too much analysis. I didn't get to full rewatch. I was watching my son at the same time as watching it, but I was able to go through and rewatch that first game where I think there was a lot shown, especially from my two favorite prospects, Ausar Thompson and Anthony Black. So, Caleb, this game was fantastic. It was pretty competitive, although there were times it seemed like it was going to be a blowout. I mean, ended the Pistons winning 89-78. A lot of what I noticed through the game, so a brief little setting the story for everyone listening if you didn't get to watch the game. Jaden Ivey, James Wiseman, and Jalen Duren it was their show. And you see that a lot from these second-year guys. Second, I guess for Wiseman, it's fourth-year guy. But from these older guys, you see in the first couple games of Summer League, they're going to try to dominate and do their thing. We saw Keegan Murray score 40 or 38, something crazy like that.
41, I think.
Yeah, we saw a great Shaedon Sharpe game. You can point to a lot of different places and find a lot of different second or third-year guys completely go off because it's just for them to just show what they've done over the summer. Jaden Ivey was trying to do that. Jalen Duren, I think, did it pretty well. Wiseman, did it pretty well. It was just overall, they didn't really treat the rest of the roster as if they were valuable. I don't know. I'm being very critical over it. But what was your take on that?
I mean, someone who's a big Jaden Ivey fan like I am, I mean, when I watched that first half, it was basically everybody knew he's the best player on the floor, and he tried to act like it, but he was just super careless with the ball, just taking stupid shots. But second half, he definitely turned around. He was way better. They were also way better. I guarantee Monty Williams went into that locker room, told Jarrett Jack to sit down. He said, "You listen up. If you want to be a key player for me next year, you're not pulling any of that crap. I don't care if it's summer league or not." But I mean, they definitely played a lot better. I mean, even today's game, I know you mentioned we're not getting too much into it. I know, Detroit still lost against Houston, but they were way more in sync today. They were a lot more they played a lot more professionally. It looked like the Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren that you would expect to see.
Yeah. Overall, like with these two games combined, I think Ausar Thompson has shown exactly what he's going to be in the NBA. A lot of summer league play, I think you can easily say it's just summer league. It's just summer league. You see guys putting up insane numbers. Didn't Randy Foye have an insane summer league game? Does that ring a bell for you?
I don't know. I saw the thing today where it's like the top scoring guys of all time. And
Yes.
I still remember there was like that Korkmaz game. He had like 40 a couple years ago. I don't know if you remember that. I watched that game. It was insane.
Yeah. I'm trying to find this Randy Foye stat, Caleb. What was it? Yes, on a fan-cited article, 10 best summer league players of all time. So at number 4, you have Randy Foye. So if that means anything to you, sometimes you can only take the stats with a grain of salt. But with Ausar Thompson, he showed a lot more than just scoring the ball. He showed he has such a high feel for the game, offensively and defensively. Obviously, his shot is a little, I don't know if I would call it broken, but I guess we're bleeding into today where we got to see more of his shots because the first game he had 4 shots. Today he had 13. Went 6 for 13, but did not make a jumper. Airballed 2 or 3 times, so it wasn't the best outing.
Yeah, it was bad.
But his ability to absolutely impact the game in transition is astounding, especially when he gets a rebound, is able to take it all full court and then throw no-look dimes or finding the right guy to pass it to. Like, he had a lot of hockey assists. That's my favorite thing because it just shows that he is allowing the team to, or he is forcing the team to play as a team because he gives the ball to Jalen Duren in transition, and he's able to easily dish that to Wiseman for a dunk. So he's setting his teammates up to set other teammates up.
It's just funny because, like, Amen's supposed to be that distributor player, but I don't see how Ausar can be too far off. I mean, you covered it perfectly. Once he gets that rebound, he just turns and burns. Goes down and just throws half-court passes, or he might get the hockey assist. I haven't really seen him make too many careless plays. There might have been like 2 I've seen so far total, but for the most part, he makes the proper decisions. He knows when to pass at the right time. He doesn't get too ahead of himself and lose the ball. Defensively, he's just a total menace, like lengthwise. Like you mentioned, he is a little bit. It showed that he might need to bulk up a little bit. There were some times in today's game against Houston, especially, where he got out muscled a little bit. But as you mentioned, like for right now with Ausar Thompson, it's interesting because his big question mark is scoring the ball and creating offense for himself. As a finisher, he's he can finish on lobs. He's got the length and the bounce to do that. He can finish his layups. He has a couple nice acrobatic ones already.
Yeah.
But for Ausar Thompson, it's great for him because if he can do everything that he's doing in summer league right now, you don't need him to shoot in year one. That can come along the road. You have they went and got guys like Monte Morris, Marcus Sasser, Joe Harris, re-signed Alec Burks. I mean, the Pistons are just building, and I still have Bogdanovich too. They haven't traded him. They're
Mhm.
just building shooters out around Cade for right now. So you don't need a Sar Thompson to shoot a 3-point, like shoot 4 3-pointers a game off the bat. That can come down the road.
Yeah,
But
especially if
his,
you're living in transition.
but his thing is like we said, doing everything else, being an elite defender, being a initiator on fast breaks. If it comes down to him, rebounding the ball, guarding the other team's best perimeter players. That's what he's going to.
I think I
You get,
lost you for 2 seconds.
oh,
I think I was looking at the clock for like 3 seconds. What was the last point you made?
oh, I just said like that's why we picked him at 5.
Looking at Asar Thompson and his ability to do absolutely everything, like you were saying, is so beneficial, especially on the defensive end. He's already an outstanding help defender because you saw him like a lot of times not being on Anthony Black, but Anthony Black would drive and then Asar would be guarding someone on either the wing or the corner three, and he would be able to just get in there, double team, and absolutely demolish Anthony Black, rip his pocket, bring it up, get an easy transition assist. Um, just his ability to absolutely blindside guys with poking the ball when they don't even know he's right there is absolutely, I'm saying absolutely a lot, but it's incredible to see.
Yeah, we just have I've noticed in summer league, we just have these crazy athletic young guys like, Asar, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Marcus Sasser, Wiseman. If you want to go on to like our actual roster too, Stewart and then Isaiah Livers. I mean, we just have all these young guys with just great defensive prowesses. I mean, if they can start developing, if Monty Williams can get this team back on the right track, I mean, that's going to be one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. You think of guys who with just the leaping abilities like they do, and just their defensive instincts of poking the ball away without fouling is just to see that in a young core like that is just so amazing.
And even Cade Cunningham, he's not the most athletic guy, but he still keeps his guys in front of him.
Hmm.
I love Asar Thompson. I think he was the pick at 5. I think a lot of people were a little bit skeptical of that pick. I can say right when it happened, I was saying maybe Jarris Walker would have been a good pick. But seeing what we saw in Summer League, I have absolutely no qualms with it. Because, like I said, what he's doing now is going to translate to the NBA. Long term, I think a lot of people see him as kind of an Andre Iguodala.
Hmm.
And I think if you're quoting Max Kellerman, if the fate of the universe is on the line, fate of the earth, whatever it is, he's taking Iguodala to take that 3 over Steph Curry.
Yeah,
So hopefully Asar Thompson can develop that 3 and somebody can have an outlandish quote about him, kind of like Max Kellerman did.
right.
But moving on to Anthony Black, who got his pocket picked by Asar Thompson, I think 2 or 3 times. Had 7 turnovers on the night, but I think he showed he had the best feel on the court. I
Oh yeah,
think with Jaden Ivey as a point guard, kind of more of a shooting guard, but he played a lot of point guard last year when Cade Cunningham was out. And I expected Ivy to have a composed game, not let the defense speed him up, even though he's already a speedy guy himself. I just wanted to see him kind of process the game at a higher level than he did. I didn't have any of those question marks with Anthony Black. A lot of the offense through that first quarter was entirely made by him. And I think the biggest thing for me is that when you look at what he had in Arkansas, he didn't have any spacing. And when you have this NBA spacing, especially with guys like Jet Howard on the court with you and DJ Wilson and those other shooters, I mean, not just is there better shooting, but you also have the 3-point line farther back. So you have more space to operate. I think the big thing is he might not live up to being a consensus best 6th overall pick, but I think his floor is one of those things where any team can utilize him. And I
Well,
already think people need to get away from that. Oh, he's the sixth pick, but he didn't live up to other six picks hype. That doesn't matter as long as he can contribute in some way.
well, I mean, you look at the sixth pick in the past couple of drafts. I mean, there hasn't really been a whole lot. I mean, like Josh Giddey was one at the top of my head that hit. But oh yeah, last year they had Mather, and I think that looks like it's going to be a hit for them.
Mm-hmm.
But typically in the past couple of years, like that 5 to 9, 10 range, it's just there's always guys in there that just don't pan out the way you want them to. I'm trying to think who number 6 was after Okoro, like that one year, and that like that one weird draft, like the COVID draft. I can't think of who it was,
Oh,
but
Onyeka Okongwu.
oh yeah, that's not a bad pick either. Maybe
Yeah,
I'm just thinking. Maybe I'm just thinking of other draft spots.
I'm looking up the history of the sixth pick. Anthony Black, Benedict Mathurin, Josh Giddey, Onyeka Okongwu, Jarrett Culver. No, probably the
Oh
worst
god.
one on this list. Mo Bamba, Jonathan Isaac, Buddy Hield, Willie Cauley-Stein, Marcus Smart, Nerlens Noel.
Oh,
Then you have probably the best or second best on this list, Damian Lillard, then Jan Vesely, Epke Udo, Johnny Flynn. That's a bad stretch right there. Danilo
oh,
Gallinari, Jillian Lee for the Bucks, Brandon Roy, Martell Webster, Josh Childress, Chris Kaman, CMU
god.
legend, DeJuan Wagner, Shane Battier, Dermar Johnson, and Wally Serbiak.
So it seems like about 30 to 40% of those picks hit.
That's interesting to me because yeah, looking at it that way, I'm not too worried about where he's going to end up in
No,
terms of skill on this list. But I think people have such a high expectation for these top 10 picks that it's almost impossible for them to live up to it. I mean, you look at Killian Hayes, he was absolutely roasted, and there were some pretty good names on that seventh pick list. Don't get me wrong. But I think people aren't too worried about how do you stack up against the other guys all time and not what are you going to bring to this team to win? Because if Anthony Black is the fourth or fifth best player on the Magic, but they still win a championship, that's a win because he's providing something meaningful.
I think what he'll give the Magic too is just like you mentioned, stability and feel, being able to control an offense at any time. Because right now, I mean, they have Cole Anthony, who's more of a shooter than a passer, anyways. But then you got Markelle Fultz and Jalen Suggs too. You have no idea when Jalen Suggs is going to be available. He still has some upside to him, but then also same thing with Markelle Fultz. You never know when he's going to be available too. So I feel like where Anthony Black comes in, he'll be that guy that takes him to the next level. Hopefully, I think his floor. People were calling him like the next Alfred Payton or something like that. If he's bad, but I don't think he'll get down to that level. I just think with his size and athleticism and his defense that he brings already as a 6'7" point guard, I mean that's just such a unique
Mm-hmm.
like a unique aspect to him already. And yeah, the shooting's not great. The only three he made was that bogus and one over Marcus Sasser off the backboard.
Mm-hmm.
But still, just for someone who can finish inside, he was taking smaller opponents to the basket, which, like, Marcus Sasser was a good example of that. But, as you mentioned too, with Ausar Thompson, some of those bigger players, can Anthony Black find a way to get in on those guys? And then that's where, too, the outside game comes along because then you don't have to force as much inside because now you can rely on your outside jumper to initiate some of the offense.
Yeah, it's very coincidental that we picked these two players to talk about just because they are guys who their games will take a tremendous leap. Like they have top 20 in the league potential if they get that jumper to around 35, 40%.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think you mentioned his floor being Alfred Payton. I think some of his ceilings could be kind of like Cade Cunningham-esque,
Yeah.
Luka-esque. And I'm not saying he's going to be those players, but
Like,
his style of play is very similar to that. I mean, his
I would
height.
like more athletic versions of those guys probably.
Yeah.
I mean, not like maybe not them for their ceiling, but like kind of like a Cade
Archetype.
Cunningham like archetype light, but like with a little bit more bounce to him.
Yeah. And I think the big thing that he, like I said originally, is that he had such a high feel for the game. And I think his use of the pick and roll was very apparent. Being able to score over guys after being able to create space, the game slowed down, and it was very apparent that he just knew exactly what he was going to do before he did it, and he knew what the defender was going to do. You texted me when James Wiseman blocked DJ Wilson or Jet Howard. I can't remember who it was.
Oh yeah, Jet Howard.
Yeah, and that was an insane block because Jet Howard was just trying to use his athleticism to get by him. He wasn't trying to be crafty.
Yeah.
And Anthony Black went through a similar thing a few possessions later, maybe later in the game, where he also went at James Wiseman, but he was able to use his skill, his size, and overall just awareness of what was happening to be able to score over Wiseman. And Wiseman, it didn't look like Wiseman was even close to like having a heavy contest on that. So
Right.
to me, that just shows that again, we're preaching this skill fundamentals over athleticism.
And plus too with Wiseman, I've seen a few times now. He had some good. I mean, I know the first time he blocked Jet Howard, he did it a second time. So Jet Howard's first two NBA shots were block shots, but there's still some times too where Anthony Black took advantage of Wiseman because you can see in the past few times where he can get lost in himself on the interior, and there's definitely ways to catch him off guard and score on him, and that's what Anthony Black did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those kind of guards are so valuable, I think, in today's NBA. And I think once we get 5 years down the road, you're going to kind of see more of them. Like Josh Giddey, I think, is the prime example right now of younger guards who come in maybe a jump shot away from being great, but being absolutely lethal at everything else. So
Mhm.
if Anthony Black can be kind of like a Josh Giddey, that's a win right there.
I think that's his player comp from what I've seen is Josh Giddey, but more
Mm-hmm.
athletic. So I think that's a
Yep.
fair. I think it's a fair comp.
Yeah, I love the size because his ability to also be a switchable defender. And when you look at this Magic roster, I mean, 1 through 5, they're enormous.
Oh
Paolo
yeah.
Banchero's huge. You have Franz Wagner running the 2 or the 3. I don't really remember what their 2-3 situation is. But then you have Anthony Black at the 1.
Hmm. Yeah, I think ideally for the Magic, you would want um, probably Wendell. I mean Wendell Carter at 5, Paolo at 4, and then you have. I'm not sure if they brought back Bobo or not because I know he was running
They
there some
waived them.
time. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, but yeah, Paolo, Wendell Carter, Franz Wagner, Anthony Black, and then hopefully you would hope that Jet Howard or Caleb Houston, who still has my award for, oh yeah, that guy is still on the floor kind of guy.
Yeah.
You would hope one of those two guys with their length and 3-point ability would turn into something defensively. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about a Magic team where their shortest guy is 6'7". That's insane.
And even if you put Jalen Suggs out there, if he can develop his
Oh
jumper a
yeah,
little bit more, then and you might be sacrificing height. You're not really because then your second shortest guy is still 6'7", but then
yeah.
you still have 2 guys who can control the offense, who can be elite defenders. They're both just jump shots away.
And still, too, Suggs even is an explosive when he's healthy, an explosive high IQ player as well. So that'd be still great to have on that lineup as well.
It kind of is like an OKC of the East because in
Yeah.
OKC you have all these high level processors in Shea, Giddy, J Dub, Chet Holmgren, guys that can absolutely kill you with IQ, and they're not afraid to pass. They're not
Mhm.
afraid to set up their teammates. When you look at Orlando, they're kind of creating a similar vibe there. I know Fran's not known for his passing and facilitating. He will do it. Paulo, he's a point forward. He kind of reminds me a little bit of a younger Lamar Odom. Then you add in Anthony Black and you have a Jalen Suggs there, and off the bench you have a Markel Fultz. Like that's a team that is built to be kind of an all-around um, facilitating team. So a lot of hockey assists incoming.
Oh, yeah.
We're getting back to kind of like Spurs-esque basketball. It feels like people are kind of taking that mindset because obviously not everyone on the Spurs was known to be elite playmakers, but they made it work when they brought these high-level veterans in. Their system was beautiful. There's times, Caleb, I just look up old Spurs basketball film just to watch the beautiful passing. And it feels like we're mixing that with athleticism now. So
I'm hoping Houston can become that team once Ime Udoka straightens those young players out.
mhm.
You know, when you bring in guys like Amen Thompson and Fred VanVleet into the mix, they're going to help distribute the ball a bit more. Maybe Jalen Green takes a back step with his, overconfidence and starts become a little bit more of a distributor as well. And plus, too, I mean, Kevin Porter Jr. is still there. People can say what they want. He does some pretty darn good distributing as well. So,
Mhm.
I mean, hopefully that would be a team too that turns into like one of those. And and Şengün, he's a
Yeah,
great passer as well at facility. How could I possibly forget that? And even Jabari Smith today, you see that full court inbounds pass of time expiring? That was
sadly.
I mean, it's just when you can see those young teams start to develop that kind of sense of sharing, even with the Pistons, they do a little bit too. I mean, that's where it gets super exciting for the future to see.
Yeah, and it seems like all these teams are taking that mold. So I love that. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you for watching. We had really good time talking just about the FIBA U19. That's all wrapped up, so we're done with that. Summer League is well on its way. We'll probably do another episode next week, breaking down a couple more prospects. But then we're going to be getting into more guys, a part of the 24 draft class, talking more about their college fits, figuring out what guys you should look out for that maybe haven't been talked about enough, or guys that maybe are talked about too much that need to be, toned down just a little bit. But if you liked it, make sure to leave a like on YouTube or a 5-star rating on Spotify. And you can find me at Leggy Sports on Twitter and at Threads at Leggy Sports. Peace out, y'all. Have a good day.